Do you ever find it hard to trust God when things just look upside down, or it just doesn't look like? I know that's funny, but
it's funny because it's true. it's easy to trust God when everything's going well.
Yeah.
But the minute things get upside down or sideways, it's sometimes a little more difficult.
Right.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think that He's often training us and building our faith when we're having to trust Him for things that we can't see, and we don't always know what it's, how He's going to fix it or what He's going to do.
That's the hard thing about faith, is that, God says that all things are going to work together for good. But when you're in the middle of something that's not so good, can you have that faith, and what builds that faith, and what it's tonight's title is Steady Steps, Trusting God's Path When You Can't See the Way. And that's really what faith is. It's trusting that He has a path, but we can't see it.
So something just popped into my head, but what percentage of the time do you think we don't know? We can't see it.
Well, I don't know. I think, I don't even know. I would say 100% of the time we don't know.
Right.
We don't ever know.
Because otherwise, why would we need
Then it's
Him?
not faith.
Right.
if we know, if we know, like He does, the end and the beginning and all that, the whole parade, as we've said before. And if we think we do, then there's no, there's no faith. Yeah. I mean, we can have, like it's easy for me to have faith in eternity. Like He says, you're going to spend eternity with me. Like, I don't have a problem with that, even though I don't know what it looks like.
Okay.
I don't know what it, I don't know. We think we know what heaven looks like, or we hear people tell stories, or we hear, scholars who have studied the Bible and said this is what it is, but we really don't know until we get there.
Yeah.
But I trust that it's going to be better than anything I've ever experienced here on earth. Because I believe that. I believe that our time here on earth is just doesn't say somewhere that it's a shadow of things to come. And I believe that there's more. So that's easy for me to believe, but sometimes to believe that the thing that I'm dealing with on a certain week is going to be taken care of in a certain time. Sometimes that's harder. So I don't know. I don't know why it's easy to believe eternity
for certain things and not for others.
And not for others. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes, I mean, I was thinking about it, about a friend of ours that has really strong faith. And when they get news, their response is always, it's okay. God's got it. He's going to take care of it. So then I was thinking, well, that person doesn't know the outcome. Right. And they are fine, but it's because of their faith. It's not because they're, they're having to, how do I say this? Like trying to conjure up the faith in the moment, because they've built up this relationship with God and this practice of growing their faith. So it's not something you can like instantly like will it up to be faith. I'm going to have faith. But when you repeatedly go through things through life and you're on this journey with Him, that's why I think we don't see how things are going to turn out. And sometimes we're going through things that we think are huge and things that are a big deal, and they are a big deal in the moment. But a lot of times they're really not as earth-shattering as we feel like they are at that moment. But it's because it is that God uses it to build our stamina, our endurance of faith on those things, so that as other challenges come, that we can have that belief that even when we don't know how something's going to work out, we can say, it's okay. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I trust God. I heard somebody say early this morning, they referenced a paper trail. What's your paper trail? Meaning, what are the scriptures that you've stood on? What are the promises that God has said? What have you journaled? What has God told you? A paper trail of things that you can stand on when you don't know.
Yeah, well, you said something earlier that it's built up, and that's and I think that that's more and more true in my life as I continue to learn and to grow more in my faith, and what God says is being true, and that we have to make a conscious effort for it. We can't just say, okay, God, I trust in you, and then expect that it's just going to automatically be like, oh, well, I can trust in everything. It's a process. When Jesus says things like, in this world you will have trouble, you will have tribulation, you will have, but then he also says, don't worry about that because I've overcome the world. So what does that mean? When things go wrong, do we remember that? Do we remember that Jesus said I was going to have trouble, but he said, don't worry about it because he's overcome. So what does that mean? Does that mean we just sit around and go, oh, well, I guess this is my lot in life? Or do we continue doing what we know God has for us in that moment and continue pressing on, even though it doesn't feel right, even though it doesn't look right, but we say, well, I'm not going to just sit on the couch and be miserable until, God figures out a way to work it out, or am I going to continue doing what I know he's brought me here to do? Because oftentimes that's what gets us out of trouble. I remember, what's his name? Matthew, the Dream Center guy. Matthew, what's his last name? Gosh, his name just escaped me right now. Anyway, he does he's a
pastor there.
Yeah, Barnett, Matthew Barnett. That's his name, right? Matthew Barnett.
Yep. I was going to say Barnes, but you're right.
Barnett. Anyway, he was telling a story at an event we were at one time about a lady who was struggling with something, and she just decided, rather than just continuing to fret about the struggle, was go find people who were struggling with the same thing and go help them.
Yeah.
And she did, and lo and behold, pretty soon she was, freed of the thing that she was struggling in because she was helping others. And I think that's part of the key too, is realizing that our struggles in life are not just to keep us down and keep us in a state of misery, but they're to help us to grow and get stronger so that we can be there for others when they, how many people do you know that have overcome things, whether it be addictions or whatever, that they've overcome, and now they're helping those who struggle in that area, and that's our effort. If we have an effort in our growth, God gives us everything that we need in order to do what he's called us to do. He's not going to ask us to do something and not give us what we need.
Right.
But we do need to walk in it. We do need to act on it in order to see
there's movement that
life,
we have to do. Yeah.
And in Psalm chapter 37, verses 3 and 4, it says, trust in the Lord and do good. Okay, we can probably all agree on that. That's God's will for us, is that we do good. We bring him glory. But then it goes on to say, dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Well, we've talked about that verse before, and that delighting ourselves is really not just being happy with ourselves, but allowing him to mold and shape us. In other words, we're delighting in the fact that he cares enough about us to mold us and shape us into who he created us to be, and being humble enough to allow him to do that. But I think the key before that is dwelling in the land. What does that mean in our walk with him? Dwelling in the land. What do you think that means with him?
I think it's because he speaks things that are true, promises for us. And I think dwell in the land is live in what he's saying.
Right. It's not the city you live in. But
live in the promises. Live in the things he's speaking over us.
Yes. And feed on his faithfulness. So what does that mean? Feed. That word feed, among other things, it had a long list. But a lot of Hebrew words have a long list of meanings that they can have. But the two that stood out to me was to devour and to graze. Yeah. So to devour something, right? If you've ever had, something, good barbecue or something, you just want to devour it. And then also to graze. What is grazing? You're just hanging out, but you're eating. You're hanging out. You watch cows in the field or sheep, and they're out there grazing, but they're eating while they're while they're walking around. And that, I think, is when we feed on God and his faithfulness, that's what it's telling us. Yeah. Feed on his word, graze it. Don't ever leave it. Yeah. Dwell in the land. It's there. Yeah. Let's graze on what he has. And when we do that, again, we're making an effort to do that. But he's given us what we're to graze on. We don't have to go find it.
Right. It's available.
It's there for us.
That makes me think of the word abide that John talks about in his gospel, and abiding in God's promises and trust. It says his faithfulness. Yeah. So if we are feeding on those things, this just came to mind because I heard this recently and I was just kind of processing it, was when you're going through things and you just don't feel faith, you don't have that trust, and you're feeling fear or you're feeling anxiety, look at what you're feeding on, or look at what you're feeding your soul. So your soul is your mind, will, and emotion. So what a lot of times we think that when we need to rest, that we want to, we'll use our rest time to feed or watch things or read things or spend time on things that we think they're mindless. They're not, they're neutral.
Right.
But what happens is we fill up because we're feeding on that. We're filling up. So we're filling up in our mind. We're filling up pictures and videos and things that we're seeing. And we're filling up on words that we're hearing and attitudes and videos of things that affect us. And we don't even realize it because we're feeding on it. We're filling our soul with it. And we don't realize it. And then we can't figure out why, whenever something bad happens, we're in panic mode and we're stressed out, and we're not walking in trust, and we're not walking in faith like our neighbor or like our friend at Bible study. And it's because they're guarding their heart, they're guarding their minds and their eyes, and they're being careful about what they're feeding on, what they're taking in. And I think when we're more intentional about what we're feeding on, it has an effect on our faith and our trust in God when we can't see what's happening or what God might be doing.
Yeah, the real foundational verse of what we're talking about tonight is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, in all our ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct our path. So when we acknowledge him in everything, he's going to be there to direct our path. But sometimes, again, like what you're saying, if we've been feeding on something that's kind of keeping us from our trust in God, we're not meditating on his truth, we're not dwelling in the land and feeding on his faithfulness, we're dwelling in another land and feeding on somebody else's faithfulness or sayings, it's going to be hard to trust him because we're not always going to go to him. We don't go to him first, and we're not acknowledging him in all our ways, and we're not leaning on him instead of our own understanding. We're not doing that because sometimes it's not easy to lean on God and trust in him because he's going to stretch us.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't like to be stretched. True. We don't like to be put in situations that are going to take us out of what we're comfortable in.
Right.
And that's his goal, is to get us where he's created us to go. And if we're not willing to submit to him and let him, as again, Psalm 37:4, delight ourselves, allow him to mold us and shape us. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? And what does it say when we don't trust him? When we don't lean on him and we don't go to him and we don't acknowledge him, what's that saying?
Well, we haven't made him the Lord of our life.
Yeah.
We're trying to run the show on our own.
We're not trusting him. We're saying, God, I know you have my best interest in your mind, and you say you're going to work all things together for good, but I don't know that I want to do that right now. I want to kind of do my own thing. And what happens when we do that, it might feel good for a moment, and we might avoid, pain in the moment maybe, but it always leads to something else because we're not following the path that he has for us. And if we follow the path he has for us, it's going to get us where he's wanting us to go. But if we get off and we say, well, it might be a little pain. I mean, look in the Bible, in the Old Testament, all the stories that we read, well, even in the New Testament too, with Paul and the things that the disciples dealt with. But in the Old Testament, those kind of stand out. The Josephs, right? God had a path for him, and it was not a fun path all the way. He was in a hole, he was in a pit, he was sold as a slave, he was put in prison, but ultimately he got where God called him to go. If you go all the way back to his vision when he said, my family is, they're going to bow down to me and all that stuff, he got to the position where they had to do that because he was in charge of the food and he was going to supply. It wasn't about them bowing down to him in the sense of, you're better than we are. It was, you have what we need. You have food for us. You have supply for us in a time when famine was rampant in the land. So Joseph had to go through a lot of painful things and a lot of trials,
Right.
but he ended up where God had for him to go. And when we follow God's path, it means that there might be pits and falls and all
Yes.
those things, but we're going to get. And that's where the trust comes in the middle of it. When it doesn't seem like it's going, when you can't see the way,
Right.
does it feel like it?
It's so interesting because I would say that and I don't know if this is true for all generations or all times, because this is the time that I live in. So this is what I know.
You've never lived in another time?
No, it'd be kind of fun to visit, but
Yeah.
what I know to be true is that in society it is an epidemic, I would say, of self-sufficiency. That everybody wants to have that feeling that they are in control of their life, and I mean, even slogans and advertising and things like that are put out that are not faith-based say the same thing, like, you do you, boo. Or, it's your life. You need to make the decisions and make the choices. And to a degree, yes, of course. But it's it's relinquishing that control and that need to know. Like, we often feel like, well, I need to know before I can make a decision, or I need to know before I do something. And especially when it is God asking us to do things, or when it's God that's leading us a certain direction. I mean, I remember when we were I don't even think we were in the process of being licensed yet, or I don't remember where we were in that process, but I remember asking God for like I wanted a clear answer, like, give me specific, yes or no, exactly what you want from us, and that you want us to take exactly this path to this road to, where we're heading. And he wouldn't give that to me. He would just say, trust me that I'm preparing you for what I've called you to. And I was like, but could you give me some specifics, an outline or something, like, let me know what it is so I can prepare myself, and I can be in control of my emotions on it, or my feelings on it, or my reaction to it. And that's not faith, and it's not trusting in the Lord. And
God requires faith, right?
Yeah.
Without faith, it's impossible to please God. But with faith, all things are possible. So it's that trust and that confidence that we have in Him that will allow us to continue walking and seeing the path as it goes. But we got to take the step. Makes me think of Indiana Jones in the episode, in the one with Sean Connery. I don't remember which one it was, but his dad, Sean Connery, The Last Crusade, I think. Yeah, you're right. And there's a scene where his dad has been taken captive, and Indy's got to get across what appears to be this giant chasm, this deep,
straight rock wall
cliff
down to
with
nothing.
no bottom. It doesn't look like, and it's a long way. And he's standing there, and he's thinking, I got to get across there. And he says to himself, "There's no way anybody could jump across."
Yeah.
And then in his mind, in a moment, he says, "It's a leap of faith." So he's thinking, like, whoever set this up, it's a leap of faith. You've got to trust. And you hear his dad yell out from where he is. He says, "You got to believe, Indy. You got to believe." And so Indiana's like, okay. And he knows he's got to do this, or his dad's going to be in trouble, and he's not going to get where he's supposed to go. So he just all of a sudden he jumps, and he doesn't go all the way to the bottom. He lands on the walkway. And then they pan back the picture, and he kind of leans over, and you see him kind of lean and look. And now he can see the path. And the thing that hit me as I was watching this clip is he didn't see the path until he took the step.
Right.
Until he took the leap.
Right.
And in our spiritual walks, it's kind of the same way. We're not going to see the path until we take that leap of faith, until we take that step and say, okay, God, I trust you. And then he'll start revealing the path
more,
to
the
us,
next,
more and more of the path. But we got to take that initial, that initial step in order to see it. Where does that come from? It comes from trust. In Proverbs 14:26, it says, "In the fear of the Lord there is strong confidence." Not just confidence, but strong confidence.
Right.
"And his children will have a place of refuge in the fear of the Lord." So what does that mean? The things that we fear in life are what causes us to act. Right? If you fear something and you're afraid of it, you're not going to do it.
Right.
But with God, our fear of him is that if I don't follow him, I'm not going to see what he has for me.
Yeah.
So if you're standing on that cliff like Indiana Jones was, and God's saying, I got something good for you on the other side, but I'm not going to show it to you. I need you to have faith and cross over. You got to take that first leap. You got to take that leap of faith. You got to believe that when God says it's over there, doesn't look like it, might not look like it, might not look like you're going to make it, might look like you're going to fall in a pit, but I want you to trust me and take that leap. That's that fear that gives us strong confidence, because we know this is scary.
Yeah.
This is scary, and that whatever it is that it might be scary, and it might be something you're afraid of, but God wants us to be more afraid of not doing what he wants us to do than being afraid of what it might look like, trusting that he's going to be there for us.
That's the awe of God. That is the awe of God, or the fear of God that we hear about. It's not a trepidation or like I'm afraid of God, but it is the awe of his sovereignty and his power, that he can do whatever he wants. There's no restrictions. There's no limitations on God. And if we walk in our life in more of a fear of God than a fear of what other people think, or a fear of not being in control, then we won't have to fear anything else. Because when we just fear God and hold him in that position of awe, then it doesn't matter what anything else is, because we know that he's got us. And when you were talking about Indiana Jones, it reminded me of the Israelites when they had to walk out into the Red Sea. They had to actually put their feet in the water.
It didn't move until they got in the water.
Till they put their toes in that water, then it moved to the side where they could go through. And so it is, sometimes there are things in our life that we don't know. We just know God's calling us a certain direction, and we don't know what he's going to do until we take that faith step and trust that he's going to take care of us and he's going to cover us. I mean, I was reading in Hebrews, and there's many, many more stories in Hebrews 11, but the two that stood out to me were Noah and Abraham. And in Hebrews 11:7, it says, "By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear," see, that's that awe of God, "constructed an ark for the saving of his household." And then Abraham, similar, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. So it's that, just taking that step out. And I love the story in the New Testament where Jesus is, the Father comes to ask Jesus to heal his daughter, and Jesus is on the way, but the man can't wait. He's like, just, help me. And in Mark 9:23, he's asking him, he says, if you want to, you can heal my daughter if it's possible. And Jesus said, "If I can, all things are possible for one who believes." And immediately the dad said, "I believe, but help my unbelief." And I love that verse because it's helpful for me when I'm in a situation where I am doubting and I can't see the end from the beginning, and I'm kind of nervous about taking that faith step. God is so faithful that we can even pray and tell him that and say, I want to have faith. I want to take this step. Help my unbelief. And he will give us what we need in order to take that step.
And how do we get that? How do we get that place where we can trust that? And that's, again, dwelling in the land and feeding on his faithfulness. That's where it comes from. If we don't dwell in his land and we don't feed on his faithfulness, we're not going to have what we need in order to trust when what hits the fan. Right. It's not going to happen. In Isaiah 41:10, it says, "Fear not, for I am with you." God's talking. "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." So he's telling us that we shouldn't fear. Now, again, this is different than fearing him. We just read where it said, in the fear of the Lord.
Right.
So that's the reverent fear. That's the
Exactly.
good. That's what we're supposed to do. But if we're fearing the things of this world, our situation or people or what it might look like, and we're not trusting him, he says, don't be dismayed, for I am your God. So we're going to feel fear.
Mm-hmm.
We can't go through life thinking that we're never going to experience fear, because he tells us, I've never counted them, but I'm told there's 365 instances where it says do not fear in the Bible. Well, 365 days a year, that tells me that we're going to have an opportunity pretty much every day to have fear of some way. But he says, don't be dismayed, that I am your God. So trust me. I'm going to strengthen you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to uphold you with my right hand. So when we trust that, he's saying, don't fear. Don't stay in that spot. We might experience it for a moment, but again, we make that decision that we're not going to stay there. We're going to trust in God. And when we're dwelling in his land and feeding on his faithfulness, we're going to be more likely to be able to do that because that's what we're feeding on. That's what we're growing in, is our faith in his faithfulness. Again, it has nothing to do with us.
Right.
We don't get what we get from him because of us doing better. It's us believing. That's what gets us to that place to where we go to him quicker than we go to our fear or ourself or our, our own ways of doing things. What do you got? We're getting close to the end. So do you have anything that you feel like you want to make sure we get out tonight?
Well, I think I hit them all. Let's see, Psalms. I have 3. Let me see. Psalms 20, verse 7 and 8. It says, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They collapse and fall, but we rise and stand upright. And so to me, the trusting in chariots and trusting in horses is like trusting in the big guns, trusting in the visible, thing that's going to get me through, where we're trusting in the Spirit of God, the word of the Lord, and his promises, and those things stand forever. And they're not something we can see all the time, but they are things that we can trust in, and we can believe that God's got it back.
Yeah. I'm going to finish with this one. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 8 through 11. It says, for you were once in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. But now you are the light. I'm going to start over. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. So what is God telling us? What is Paul writing through the Spirit to let us know is that we were once in darkness because we didn't trust in God. We didn't trust his word. We weren't dwelling in his field, and we weren't feeding on his faithfulness. But now that we are, the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. So we have the fruit of the Spirit in us when we accept Jesus into our life. That comes in. Again, it's not something we earn. It's not something, but it is something we need to grow in. We don't just all of a sudden, if you've ever planted a fruit tree, does it just immediately pop out fruit? No, it takes a while.
Forever.
It takes a while.
Not forever,
It can take a while.
It
can take, and we have to grow in that. But what it's telling us is finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. And how do we do that? Again, we dwell in his land and we feed on his faithfulness. Yeah. And we have no fellowship with unfruitful work. So if there's things in our life that are still leading to darkness, again, negative thoughts or causing us to be stuck in some area of our life, and an addiction that we can't break or whatever, that we don't live in that world. We say, no, God has changed me. I am a new creation in him because of what Jesus did for me. And we start to tell ourselves that. We start to dwell again in that land. What is that land that we're dwelling in? Dwell in that. Dwell in his truth, because that's what's going to cause us to grow and to start developing that fruit that is in us.
Yes.
But it's not yet popping out on the branches yet, because we're still in that process. So don't give up on the process. Don't stop. Keep feeding, keep believing, and keep trusting, and keep repeating. Meditate on God's word, because that's where the change comes from.
Right.
Jesus paid the price for the change, and we are new creations in him, but we got to get the old junk. We're transformed through renewing our mind. Right. And what does that take? It takes us making the effort to renew it in some fashion.
Yeah.
Spending time with God in prayer and spending time in his word and doing those things. And when we do that, we're going to create steady steps because we're going to trust him. Our trust in him is going to be not easy, but easier because we have more of his truth in us than the negative of the dark world. So that's where he wants us to live.
Yes, and it's not, like you said, it's not always easy, and sometimes it feels awkward, and we feel like I should be better at this, but we have to just remain and keep going and not let that discourage us, because God's not upset about it.
No, he wants us to live the life that he created us for. That's what he sent Jesus for. He loved us so much that he gave up his only son for us so that we could live that life. So he's not going to do all of that if he doesn't believe in us. And he believes in you. He believes in us. He believes in all of us. And he's there for us. And he wants us to trust him and lean on him. So can you do that? Can you trust him? We're trying. I hope you are too. Keep looking at him. Keep following his light upon your path. Do you want to pray and close us?
Father God, we thank you for your word and your promises. We thank you for taking care of us, for being faithful. And God, we just, we thank you that you guide us and you direct us. And even when we can't see the end from the beginning or where we're going, we know that you have our best interest in heart. So Lord, help our unbelief and continue to stay with us and help us to grow in our faith and in our ability to trust you and to lean on you. And we give you all the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for joining us. All those who are here each and every week, we're glad that you're with us. We love interacting and chatting with you. And if you're new, we'd love to get to know you as well. So leave your name and where you're from, and we'd love to connect with you. If there's anything you need, please let us know. DM us or on our website, calvaryfaithcenter.org. There's a place to enter prayer request. We'd love to partner with you and believe with you for God's best in your life as well. So come back next week, every week, 7 o'clock Pacific time on Facebook and YouTube. We're here, and we also live stream our Sunday morning service at 10 a.m. Pacific time on these same platforms. So we invite you to come and be a part of that as well. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.